I opened my eyes expecting to see heaven, hell, or simply nothing at all. Instead, I saw our bedroom ceiling, the same water stain in the corner that Marcus kept promising to fix. But something was wrong. I was standing, not lying down, and I could see my own body on the bed, pale and still, my lips already blue. Paramedics worked frantically around me, while Marcus sobbed in the corner, playing the devastated husband to perfection. "We're losing her," one of them said, pressing the defibrillator paddles to my chest. Come on, come on!" But I was already gone. I was standing right here, watching them try to resurrect a corpse. The realization should have terrified me, but all I felt was a strange detachment, like watching a movie of someone else's life. Time of death, 10:47 p.m. The lead paramedic finally announced. Marcus's wails grew louder, more theatrical. But when he thought no one was looking, I saw him check his watch and smile. That's when the rage hit me like a freight train. I tried to scream, to grab him, to shake him until he admitted what he'd done. But my hands passed right through him, through everything. I was a ghost, invisible and incorporeal, trapped in a world that could no longer see or hear me. The next few hours blurred together. Police asking questions, Marcus giving tearful answers about my depression and recent health problems, neighbors arriving with casseroles and condolences, my parents, destroyed by grief, clinging to Marcus as if he were their own son. She just couldn't get over the accident, Marcus told Detective Morrison, dabbing his eyes with my favorite handkerchief. The guilt was eating her alive. Her therapist was concerned about suicidal ideation. "What therapist?" I shrieked at him, knowing he couldn't hear me. "I never saw a therapist." "You're lying." But of course, Marcus had thought of everything. He produced business cards, appointment schedules, even prescription bottles for antidepressants I'd never taken. The man I'd married had spent months, maybe years, building a case for my suicide. Detective Morrison seemed satisfied. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Truden. We'll need to wait for the toxicology report, but everything points to self-inflicted poisoning." "The note she left?" "Note? Bart. Inside, a friend had been watching house. Answer some polite questions. How could the truth of a death be a suicide?" Inside their brains, they should check the black light to say whether it was note or not. But then when they opened the door, the Detective Morrison didn't believe her that so upset. How would they know what she looked like? I screamed. "What note?" Marcus handed over a piece of paper in my handwriting, or a very good forgery of it. I watched in horror as Detective Morrison read aloud. "I can't live with the guilt anymore. What I did to Elena haunts me every day. Marcus deserves better than a murderer for a wife. By the time you read this, I'll finally be paying for my sins. Please don't hate me, Renee." Sure, it's not you saying that. But my voice echoed unheard in the room where my body had already been zipped into a black bag. I followed Marcus everywhere in the days after my death. I had nowhere else to go, no other existence I could comprehend. Death, it seemed, didn't come with an instruction manual. At my funeral, Marcus played his role perfectly. Black suit, red eyes, trembling voice, as he delivered a eulogy that painted me as a tortured soul who'd finally found peace. Half the town attended, whispering about the poor girl who never got over killing Elena Hartwell. "She was the kindest person I ever knew," Marcus said, his voice breaking at just the right moment. "But she carried a burden no one should have to bear. In the end, the guilt became too much. I wanted to vomit. If ghosts could vomit." Everything he said was a lie wrapped in just enough truth to be believable. I had felt guilty about the accident, had struggled with survivor's remorse, but I'd never been suicidal, never left a note, never even considered taking my own life. After the service, I watched Marcus comfort my grieving parents. "She loved you both so much," he told my mother, holding her as she sobbed. In her final weeks, she kept talking about how she didn't deserve parents as wonderful as you. "We should have seen the signs," Mom wept. "Should have gotten her more help." "Don't blame yourselves," Marcus said, stroking her gray hair. "Renee was very good at hiding her pain, even from me." Liar, liar, liar. That night, alone in our house, Marcus's mask finally slipped. I watched him pour himself a generous glass of whiskey and toast my portrait on the mantel. "Well done, Marcus," he said to his reflection in the window. "Though I have to admit, You dragged it out longer than necessary. Could have poisoned her on our wedding night and saved yourself 5 years of pretending to love her. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Aunt Vivian, it's done. The bitch is dead. No, it went perfectly. Suicide, just like we planned. Even left a confession about Elena. I know. 5 years of marriage was a hell of a long con, but it was worth it to watch her suffer. And now her inheritance is mine. Inheritance? I'd left everything to Marcus in my will, of course, but I'd never thought of it as particularly significant. My trust fund, the house my grandmother left me, some investments, maybe $500,000 total. What do you mean, how much? Marcus laughed. Try 2.3 million plus the estate in Martha's Vineyard. The stupid cow never even knew how much she was worth. Her parents kept her in the dark about the full extent of her trust fund. Period. 2.3 million. I'd been worth more dead than I'd ever known I was alive. And Marcus had killed me for it. But as the days passed, I began to realize that money wasn't his only motive. Every morning, he visited Elena's grave, speaking to her headstone like she could hear him. I did it, Elena, he'd whisper, kneeling in the dirt. I made her pay for what she did to you. She suffered, just like you did. She died knowing everyone thought she was a murderer, just like I wanted. The depth of his hatred stunned me. He'd married me not just for money, but for revenge. He'd spent 5 years of his life pretending to love me while planning my destruction. I might have been dead, but I wasn't powerless. Rage, I discovered, was an excellent motivator for a ghost. I started small, moving objects when Marcus wasn't looking, creating cold spots that made him shiver, interfering with electronics. The first time I managed to knock a glass off the kitchen counter, Marcus jumped like he'd been shot. What the hell? He looked around the empty room, his face pale. Must be the old pipes. This house has always had issues. But when it happened again the next day, and again the day after that, he started to look genuinely unsettled. I began focusing my energy, learning to manipulate small objects. A picture frame falling off a shelf. A door slamming shut. His coffee mug sliding across the table. Okay, very funny universe, Marcus muttered, after I'd managed to turn every light switch in the house on and off repeatedly. I get it, guilty conscience. Haha. But I could see the fear growing in his eyes. A man who'd coldly poisoned his wife was apparently terrified of ghosts. My breakthrough came when I realized I could interact with electronics more easily than physical objects. I started with his computer, typing messages that appeared and disappeared before he could read them fully. Random websites opening on his browser. His music changing to songs that reminded him of me. Then I got bolder. I began accessing his email, his phone records, his browsing history. What I found made my ghostly blood run cold. Marcus hadn't just planned my death. He'd been planning it for years. Emails to poison suppliers, research into untraceable toxins, conversations with someone named V about the Elena situation, and making the bitch pay. But the real bombshell was in his deleted emails, messages I was able to recover by some trick of supernatural computing. V, the setup is perfect. Everyone already blames her for Elena's death. Marcus, 5 years of marriage is a long time to fake love. V, think of it as method acting. Besides, you need to establish yourself as the grieving husband. No one can suspect you had any motive beyond justice for Elena. Marcus, sometimes I almost believe I love her. She's so pathetically grateful for any affection. V, don't go soft on me now. Remember what she took from us. Remember Elena dying in that hospital bed. Marcus, I know, but what if we're wrong? What if the accident really wasn't her fault? V, does it matter? Elena is dead. Someone has to pay. Might as well be the girl who walked away. The messages went back years, detailing a conspiracy that made my head spin. This V person had been encouraging Marcus's hatred, feeding his desire for revenge, helping him plan my murder. But who was V? I threw myself into investigating my own murder with the determination of the dead. I had nothing but time, and my ghostly abilities were growing stronger with practice. I could now move through walls, read private documents, even influence electronics with increasing precision. The breakthrough came when I decided to visit Elena's grave. I'd avoided it before. Too painful. Too many memories of the bright, laughing girl who'd been like a sister to me. But now I needed answers. The cemetery was peaceful in the early morning light. Elena's headstone was elaborate, expensive, black granite with gold lettering and a carved angel. Fresh flowers lay at its base, replaced regularly by someone who still mourned her deeply. "I'm so sorry, Elena," I whispered to the stone, knowing she couldn't hear me, but needing to say it anyway. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you. I'm sorry everyone blames me. I'm sorry I married your brother without knowing he hated me for something I never did." As I knelt by her grave, something caught my eye. A small plaque I'd never noticed before, placed slightly behind the main headstone. It read, "In loving memory of our daughter, Elena Hartwell, taken from us by preventable tragedy. V. Hartwell. V. Hartwell. Vivian Hartwell, Marcus's aunt. The woman who'd raised him and Elena after their parents died in a plane crash. The woman who'd always been cold to me at family gatherings, who'd made subtle comments about my responsibility in Elena's death. She was the mysterious V from the emails. I raced back to town, my ghostly form moving faster than any car. Vivian lived in a grand Victorian mansion on Elm Street, inherited from her father and maintained with the precision of a museum curator. I'd only been there a few times, uncomfortable visits where Vivian served tea in china so delicate I was afraid to breathe on it. Now, I drifted through her walls like smoke, searching for answers. What I found was a shrine. Elena's bedroom had been preserved exactly as she'd left it 5 years ago. Pink walls, stuffed animals, the Harvard acceptance letter still pinned to her bulletin board. But it wasn't a loving memorial. It was something darker, more obsessive. The walls were covered with newspaper clippings about the accident, police reports, photographs of the crash scene. But strangest of all were the pictures of me. Dozens of them, taken from a distance over the years. Me walking to work, grocery shopping, having dinner with Marcus. Each photo was marked with dates and notes in Vivian's spidery handwriting. March 15th, Target seems happy. Disgusting. July 22nd, still living in Elena's shadow. Good. December 3rd, Marcus reports she's been having nightmares. Excellent progress. I was looking at the documentation of a 5-year stalking campaign. But the real revelation was on Vivian's desk, a leather journal filled with her thoughts and plans. I read with growing horror. Elena should have been the one to inherit father's fortune. She was brilliant, destined for greatness. Instead, that little nobody gets to live the life Elena deserved. It's not fair. It's not right. Marcus is too soft. He actually seems to care about the girl sometimes. I have to keep reminding him of what she took from us. Elena died because of her carelessness, her inability to control a simple car. She deserves to suffer for that. The marriage was genius. Who would suspect a loving husband? And the inheritance will be ours once she's gone. Elena's money, as it should have been from the beginning. But the entry that made my ghostly heart stop was dated just 2 weeks before my death. Marcus is wavering again. He actually suggested that maybe we should just take the money and let her live. Fool. He doesn't understand that this was never just about money. Elena died in that hospital, died in agony, while that girl walked away with barely a scratch. Someone has to pay for that injustice. If Marcus won't finish what we started, I'll do it myself. Vivian hadn't just encouraged Marcus to kill me. She'd been prepared to do it herself if he backed out. But why? What had really happened the night Elena died? I spent the next week haunting the county records office, the hospital, anywhere I might find information about Elena's death. Being incorporeal had its advantages. Locked doors meant nothing, security cameras couldn't see me, and I could work around the clock without rest. Elena had been in critical condition after the accident, but stable. The doctors had been cautiously optimistic about her recovery. Brain swelling was going down, vital signs were improving. She should have lived. But at 3:47 a.m. on October 15th, 5 years ago, Elena Hartwell had gone into sudden cardiac arrest and died despite all efforts to resuscitate her. The official cause of death was listed as complications from traumatic brain injury, but something about the timeline bothered me. I kept searching through medical records, cross-referencing visiting logs and staff schedules. Then I found it. Vivian Hartwell had visited Elena at 3:15 a.m. on the night she died, 32 minutes before Elena went into cardiac arrest. The visitor log showed she'd stayed for exactly 20 minutes, long enough to do what? I needed more information, but hospital records from 5 years ago were stored in a basement archive that even I couldn't easily access. However, I could access the personal files of Dr. Sarah Chen, the attending physician who'd treated Elena. Dr. Chen had kept detailed notes, more detailed than what appeared in the official record, and buried in her private files was a memo she'd never sent. Patient Hartwell's sudden deterioration is suspicious. Cardiac arrest pattern inconsistent with brain injury complications. Requested toxicology screen, but family aunt refused autopsy. Without autopsy, cannot investigate further, making note in case questions arise later. Elena hadn't died from her injuries. Someone had murdered her, and I was beginning to suspect who. Armed with this new information, I returned to Vivian's house with a different purpose. I wasn't just looking for evidence anymore. I was looking for a confession, and I had a plan. Vivian kept her laptop on a desk in her study, always connected to the internet. Over the past week, I'd been practicing manipulating electronics with increasing precision. Now I put those skills to work. I began slowly, a few typing sounds in the middle of the night, random websites opening on her browser, her music changing to Elena's favorite songs, small things that could be explained away as computer glitches. But Vivian was already on edge. She'd been visiting Elena's grave more frequently, talking to the headstone in increasingly agitated whispers. "I did it for you, Elena," she'd say, her voice shaking. "Everything I did was for you. You were supposed to inherit everything, supposed to carry on the Hartwell name with pride. That girl took your future away." On the 5th night of my electronic haunting, I made my move. I waited until Vivian was in her study, grading papers from the private school where she taught history. Then I began typing on her laptop, the words appearing on her screen in real time. "Why did you kill Elena?" Vivian jumped back from the desk like she'd been slapped. She stared at the screen for a long moment, then deleted the words and typed her own response. "Who is this? How are you accessing my computer?" I replied immediately. "You know who this is. Why did you kill your own niece?" "This is ridiculous," Vivian said aloud, her voice shaking. "Someone's hacking my computer. It's probably those neighborhood kids." But her hands were trembling as she typed. "I don't know what you're talking about. Elena died in an accident. Elena died in a hospital bed while you stood over her. What did you give her? What did you inject into her IV line?" The color drained from Vivian's face. She looked around the empty room, as if expecting to see me standing there. "Potassium chloride," she typed finally. "But she was going to die anyway." The doctor said her brain injury was severe. I was being merciful. Merciful or greedy? A long pause. Then, "You don't understand. Elena was everything. Brilliant, beautiful, destined for greatness. She was supposed to inherit father's fortune, supposed to rebuild the Hartwell legacy. Instead, that mediocre nobody gets to walk away from the crash that should have killed her instead. So you murdered Elena and framed me for the accident." "I didn't frame you." The words appeared quickly, angrily. "You were driving. You were responsible. Elena died because you couldn't control a simple car. The other driver ran the red light. The police report cleared me of any wrongdoing. Police reports can be wrong. I know what really happened. Elena told me before she lost consciousness. She said you were driving recklessly, showing off for some boy. She said you caused the crash through your own stupidity." I felt my ghostly rage building, giving me more power than ever before. Every light in the house began flickering. Windows rattled in their frames. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees in seconds. Elena never regained consciousness after the accident. I typed, the words appearing faster than humanly possible. "She couldn't have told you anything. You're lying." The house shook like it was in an earthquake. Books fell from shelves. Picture frames shattered on the floor. And still I kept typing. "You killed Elena because she was going to recover. Because she would have inherited your father's money. Because your own daughter would have gotten nothing." "Stop," Vivian screamed, but the words kept appearing on her screen. "You murdered your niece for money. Then you spent 5 years convincing Marcus to murder me. All for money that was never yours to take." The laptop screen cracked, but somehow the words were still visible. "How many people have you killed for the Hartwell fortune, Vivian?" That's when she broke completely. "Elena wasn't supposed to die," she sobbed, collapsing into her chair. "I just wanted to make sure that she wouldn't suffer. The doctor said her brain injury was too severe, that she'd be a vegetable if she survived. I was being kind." The laptop screen flickered, and new words appeared. "Tell me the truth." "The truth?" Vivian laughed bitterly. "The truth is that my daughter deserved that inheritance. Margot is smart, accomplished, everything Elena pretended to be. But father's will was clear. The money goes to the eldest daughter of each generation. Elena was 3 months older than Margot. 3 months. So you killed her. I helped her die with dignity. And yes, I made sure Margot would inherit what she deserved. But then you survived, you little nobody, and everyone felt sorry for you instead of blaming you like they should have. You got to live Elena's life, marry her brother, inherit money that should have gone to a Hartwell. Is that why you convinced Marcus to kill me? Marcus didn't need convincing. He wanted revenge for Elena's death. I just pointed him in the right direction, helped him see that you deserved to suffer for what you did. The house had gone completely silent except for Vivian's ragged breathing. Then, slowly, words appeared on the cracked screen. Marcus is going to learn the truth about what you did to Elena. And when he does, he's going to destroy you and your daughter the same way he destroyed me. Getting Marcus to discover Vivian's confession required patience and careful manipulation. I couldn't simply show him the laptop. He'd dismiss it as some kind of electronic malfunction or elaborate prank. I needed him to find the evidence naturally, in a way that would be undeniably real. The opportunity came 3 weeks later, when Vivian invited Marcus for dinner. It was a family tradition she'd maintained since Elena's death. Monthly dinners where they'd reminisce about happier times. And I now realized where Vivian had been systematically poisoning Marcus's mind against me. I watched from the corner of Vivian's dining room as she fussed over the meal, her hands shaking slightly as she arranged flowers that were the exact shade of pink Elena had loved. Marcus arrived promptly at 7, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing the black suit he'd bought for my funeral. He looked terrible, thinner than before, with dark circles under his eyes and a haunted expression I recognized from my own mirror during the worst days after the accident. "You look awful, dear," Vivian said, kissing his cheek. "Are you sleeping?" "Not much," Marcus admitted, settling into his usual chair. "The house feels different since Renee died. Cold. Sometimes I swear I can hear her voice." "Guilt," Vivian said firmly, pouring wine into crystal glasses that had belonged to her father. "It's natural to feel guilty after driving someone to suicide, even when they deserved it." Marcus flinched. "Did she deserve it, though? Sometimes I wonder if we were wrong about the accident. The police investigation was thorough. They found no evidence of reckless driving on Renee's part." "Police make mistakes," Vivian said, the same words she'd been repeating for 5 years. "Elena told me what really happened before she died. Renee was showing off, driving too fast, not paying attention to the road. But Elena was unconscious after the crash," Marcus said slowly. "The paramedics said she never woke up." Vivian's wine glass paused halfway to her lips. "She had moments of consciousness, brief periods when the swelling went down." "That's not what the medical records say." "Medical records aren't always complete. Doctors miss things." I could see Marcus studying his aunt with new eyes, noticing the inconsistencies in her story for the first time. This was my moment. I focused all my energy on Vivian's study, where her laptop sat closed on the desk. Slowly, carefully, I managed to power it on and open the document where she'd typed her confession to me. Then I triggered the smoke detector in the kitchen. "Oh, damn!" Vivian jumped up as the shrill alarm filled the house. "The roast must be burning. Marcus, could you check the study window?" Sometimes the alarm goes off when the neighbor's barbecue smoke blows over. Marcus walked into the study just as I'd hoped. The laptop screen was glowing, displaying Vivian's typed confession in all its damning detail. I watched his face change as he read, color draining from his cheeks with each line. Potassium chloride, being merciful. Elena wasn't supposed to die. By the time Vivian returned from dealing with the smoke alarm, Marcus was standing in her study doorway, like a statue, his face white with shock. "Marcus, what's wrong? What is this?" He pointed at the laptop screen with a trembling hand. "What is this confession?" Vivian's eyes went wide as she saw what was displayed on her computer. I don't know. Someone must have hacked my laptop. Those neighborhood kids are always..." "You killed Elena." His voice was barely a whisper. "You murdered your own niece. Marcus, you don't understand. You let me believe Renee was responsible. You encouraged me to hate her. You helped me plan her murder." His voice was getting louder, more dangerous. And all this time, you were the one who killed Elena. Elena was going to be a vegetable, Vivian screamed. The doctor said her brain injury was too severe. I was being merciful. Merciful? Marcus grabbed her by the shoulders, shaking her. You were being greedy. You killed Elena so your daughter would inherit the family fortune. Margot deserved that money more than Elena ever did. Elena was weak, soft, too kind for her own good. Margot is strong, ambitious, everything a Hartwell should be. Elena was 19 years old, Marcus roared. She had her whole life ahead of her. Harvard, law school, everything she'd worked for. And you took it away because you wanted money? Vivian broke free from his grip, backing toward the fireplace, where a poker hung from the hearth tools. You don't understand what it was like, watching Elena get everything handed to her, while my daughter had to scrape and fight for recognition. The inheritance should have been Margot's from the beginning. So you murdered Elena and convinced me to murder an innocent woman? Renee wasn't innocent. She was in that car. She was driving when Elena died. Because some drunk idiot ran a red light. Marcus's voice cracked with anguish. The accident wasn't her fault, and you knew it. You knew it, and you let me destroy the only person who ever really loved me. I watched as the full weight of his realization hit him. He staggered backward, one hand pressed to his chest as if he was having a heart attack. Oh God, he whispered. What have I done? Renee, sweet, innocent Renee. I poisoned her. I watched her die. I convinced everyone she committed suicide. He looked up at Vivian with eyes full of horror and rage. And it was all for nothing. She never hurt anyone. She loved Elena like a sister. She took Elena's life, Vivian shrieked. No, Marcus lunged forward, grabbing the poker from the fireplace. You took Elena's life. You murdered her in cold blood, and then you made me into a murderer too. What happened next was swift and brutal. Vivian tried to run, but Marcus caught her before she reached the door. The poker caught her across the temple, and she went down hard, blood pooling beneath her silver hair. Marcus stood over her body, the weapon still in his hands, breathing heavily. Then he slowly sank to his knees beside her corpse. Elena, he whispered. I'm so sorry, Elena. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I'm sorry I let her poison my mind against Renee. I'm sorry for everything. I should have felt satisfaction watching Marcus discover the truth. Instead, I felt only a profound sadness for all the lives Vivian's greed had destroyed. Elena, dead at 19. Me, murdered for a crime I never committed. Marcus, turned into a killer by lies and manipulation. Even Vivian herself, driven to murder by jealousy and avarice. Marcus sat in Vivian's study for 3 hours before calling the police. I watched him stare at her body, at the confession still glowing on the laptop screen, at his own hands stained with her blood. When Detective Morrison arrived with the crime scene team, Marcus was still sitting on the floor beside Vivian's corpse. I killed her, he said simply. I found out she murdered Elena, and I killed her. The detective looked confused. Sir, Elena died 5 years ago in a car accident. No. Marcus pointed at the laptop. She murdered Elena in the hospital. Injected potassium chloride into her IV line. It's all there, in her confession. Detective Morrison read the screen with growing amazement. This is, Mr. Trudon, if this is authentic, we're talking about a double homicide. Elena's death would need to be reclassified, and your wife's suicide. Renee didn't commit suicide, Marcus said, his voice hollow. I poisoned her, aconitine from monkshood flowers. I made it look like suicide because I blamed her for Elena's death. But Elena didn't die in the accident. Vivian killed her for money. The next few hours were a blur of arrests, evidence collection, and shocked revelations. Marcus confessed to my murder in detail, providing evidence that transformed my death from suicide to homicide. Vivian's journal was discovered, documenting years of obsessive planning and jealous rage. But the biggest shock came when they exhumed Elena's body for a second autopsy. 5 years later, potassium chloride was still detectable in her tissue samples. Dr. Chen's suspicions had been correct. Elena Hartwell had been murdered by someone she trusted. The story made national headlines. Aunt murders niece for inheritance, convinces nephew to kill wife. Marcus was charged with first-degree murder in my death. Even with his full confession and cooperation, even with the mitigating circumstances of Vivian's manipulation, he was looking at life in prison. I followed him to his jail cell, watched him sit on the narrow cot with his head in his hands. Renee, he whispered to the empty room, if you can hear me somehow, I need you to know how sorry I am. I need you to know that I loved you even when I was poisoning myself against you. And were moments, so many moments, when I almost backed out, when I almost told you the truth and begged your forgiveness. He looked up at the ceiling, as if he could see me there. Vivian showed me pictures of Elena in the hospital, all broken and still. She kept telling me that you walked away without a scratch while Elena died in agony. She made me believe you were responsible, that you deserved to suffer for it. Tears streamed down his face. But even when I hated you, part of me still loved you. The way you'd bring me coffee in the morning without being asked. The way you'd defend me when people whispered about our marriage. The way you'd hold me when I had nightmares about Elena. He buried his face in his hands. You were so good to me, Renee. So patient with my moods. So understanding when I pulled away from you. You never stopped trying to make me happy, even when I was planning your death. What kind of monster does that make me? I wanted to reach out to him, to touch his face, to tell him that understanding his pain didn't mean I forgave him. But I remained invisible, incorporeal, a witness to his breakdown, but unable to offer comfort or condemnation. Marcus's trial began 6 months later. I attended every day, sitting in the gallery beside my parents, watching the man I'd once loved face justice for my murder. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Janet Wells, painted Marcus as a cold-blooded killer who'd spent 5 years planning the perfect murder. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she said during opening statements, Marcus Truden didn't just kill his wife in a moment of passion. He courted her, married her, lived with her for 5 years, all while planning her death. He researched poisons, forged suicide notes, and created an elaborate backstory to make her murder look like self-inflicted death. This isn't a crime of passion, it's premeditated murder in the first degree. But Marcus's defense attorney, a gray-haired man named David Chen, Dr. Sarah Chen's brother, as it turned out, argued that his client had been psychologically manipulated by a master manipulator. "My client is guilty," he admitted to the jury. He doesn't deny killing Renee Truden. But he's also a victim, the victim of a sophisticated psychological manipulation campaign conducted by his aunt, Vivian Hartwell, over a period of 5 years. The trial revealed details about my death that I'd never known. Marcus testified about how Vivian had slowly poisoned his mind against me, showing him fabricated evidence of my reckless driving, creating fake witness statements about the accident, even doctoring photographs to make my injuries look less severe than they actually were. "She had an answer for every doubt I raised," Marcus said from the witness stand, his voice barely audible. When I questioned whether Renee was really responsible for the accident, Vivian would show me pictures of Elena in the hospital. When I started to feel guilty about planning Renee's death, Vivian would remind me how Renee got to live while Elena died. "Did you ever consider that your aunt might be lying?" Prosecutor Wells asked during cross-examination. "No," Marcus whispered. "I trusted her completely. She'd raised Elena and me after our parents died. She was the only family we had left. Why would she lie about something so important?" "For $2.3 million, Wells replied coldly. The prosecution's case was devastating. They presented evidence of Marcus's research into untraceable poisons, his careful construction of my suicide, his coldly calculated performance as the grieving husband. They played recordings of his phone calls with Vivian planning the details of my death, but the defense countered with expert testimony about psychological manipulation, showing how Vivian had used classic cult indoctrination techniques to control Marcus's thoughts and emotions. They brought in Dr. Sarah Chen to testify about her suspicions regarding Elena's death, and how Vivian had blocked the autopsy that might have revealed the truth 5 years earlier. Marcus Truden was as much a victim of Vivian Hartwell's manipulation as his wife was, David Chen argued in his closing statement. Vivian didn't just murder Elena, she murdered Marcus's ability to think clearly, to question her lies, to see his wife as anything other than his sister's killer. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, their verdict was nuanced. Guilty of second-degree murder, not first-degree. They'd accepted that Marcus had been manipulated, but they'd also concluded that he was ultimately responsible for his own actions. Judge Martinez sentenced him to 25 years to life in prison. "Mr. Truden," the judge said, "I recognize that you were the victim of sophisticated psychological manipulation. However, you made a conscious choice to murder your wife, a woman who by all accounts loved you deeply and had done nothing to deserve your hatred. The court cannot ignore the premeditated nature of your crime. regardless of the circumstances that led to it. Marcus showed no emotion as he was led away in shackles. But I saw him look up at the gallery one last time, his eyes searching for something, or someone, he couldn't see. The revelation of Elena's murder sent shockwaves through our small town. The Hartwell family, once respected pillars of the community, became pariahs overnight. Vivian's daughter Margot, the girl who would have inherited everything if the plan had succeeded, was forced to give up her trust fund to cover the legal expenses and civil lawsuits that followed. My parents used the money from my estate to establish a foundation for car accident victims. Something that would have made me proud if I'd been alive to see it. They also pushed for Elena's case to be officially reclassified as a homicide, giving her the justice she'd been denied for 5 years. Our daughter wasn't a murderer, my mother said at a press conference, tears streaming down her face. She was a victim, just like Elena. Both girls deserved better than what happened to them. I spent months haunting the places that had mattered to me in life. Our house, now empty and for sale. The coffee shop where Marcus and I had our first date. Elena's grave where I finally felt able to say goodbye to the friend I'd lost twice over. But as time passed, I began to feel a strange restlessness. My quest for truth was complete. Marcus had been punished for his crimes. Vivian's lies had been exposed. Justice, such as it was, had been served. So why was I still here? The answer came on a cold February morning, exactly 1 year after my death. I was drifting through the cemetery, visiting Elena's grave, as had become my habit, when I sensed another presence nearby. Elena was sitting on her own headstone, translucent and shimmering in the morning light. "Hello, Renee," she said, her voice carrying the same warmth I remembered from life. "I've been waiting for you." I stared at her in shock. "Elena, you're a ghost too?" "I was," she said, standing up and smoothing down the hospital gown she died in. "I stayed to watch over Marcus, to try to protect him from Vivian's influence, but I was too weak, too new to death to make much of a difference." "You tried to warn him?" "I tried. Little things, cold spots when Vivian was lying, electronics malfunctioning when she showed him fake evidence about the accident. But Marcus couldn't see me, couldn't hear me. He was too consumed by grief and hatred." I drifted closer to her, marveling at seeing my friend again. "Why didn't you move on? Why did you stay?" Elena's smile was sad but peaceful. "The same reason you did, I think. Unfinished business. I needed the truth to come out, needed Marcus to know what really happened. I couldn't rest while Vivian was poisoning his mind against you. But now he knows." "Now he knows," she agreed. "And now we both have a choice to make." As if summoned by her words, I felt a strange pulling sensation, like a gentle current trying to draw me away from the cemetery. I could sense something beyond the veil of death. Not heaven or hell, but something else. Something that felt like peace, like home, like a chance to begin again. "The next life?" I asked. "Or whatever comes next," Elena said. "I don't know what it is, but it feels right, like we've learned what we needed to learn here." I thought about Marcus alone in his prison cell, living with the guilt of what he'd done. Part of me wanted to stay, to continue haunting him, to make sure he suffered for every day of pain he'd caused me. But what would be the point? He was already suffering more than any ghost could make him suffer. He'd destroyed his own life as thoroughly as he destroyed mine. Continuing to torment him wouldn't bring me peace. It would only trap me in the same cycle of hatred and revenge that had destroyed him. "I have to see him one more time," I said. "I have to. I don't know what I have to do, but I need to see him." And a prison was a grim, gray fortress on the outskirts of the city. I drifted through its walls like smoke, past guards and inmates, following the familiar pull that had always led me to Marcus. I found him in his cell, thinner than ever, staring at a photograph of Elena and me from happier times. We were at a college party, both of us laughing at something off camera, our arms around each other's shoulders. Sisters by choice, if not by blood. "I kept this picture in my wallet for 5 years," Marcus was saying to his cellmate, a burly man with gang tattoos who was pretending not to listen. "My sister and my wife, the two most important people in my life. And I let hatred turn me into their killer." "You didn't kill your sister," the cellmate said gruffly. "That was your crazy aunt." "Well, I might as well have," Marcus replied, tracing Elena's face in the photograph with one finger. "If I hadn't been so consumed with revenge, if I'd bothered to ask the right questions, I might have figured out what Vivian did years ago. Elena might have gotten justice. Renee might still be alive." He set the photograph on his narrow desk and pulled out a piece of paper covered with his handwriting. "I've been writing her letters," he said. "Renee, I know she can't read them, but I need to tell her things. Things I should have said when she was alive." I drifted closer, reading over his shoulder. "Dear Renee, today marks 1 year since I murdered you. I want you to know that not a single day has passed without me thinking about what I did, what I took away from the world when I killed you. You were everything good that I wasn't. Patient when I was cruel, forgiving when I was vengeful, loving when I was consumed with hate. You deserved a husband who would cherish you, protect you, build a life with you. Instead, you got me. I know saying I'm sorry isn't enough. Nothing I could say or do would be enough to make up for what I did to you. But I need you to know that I remember who you really were, not the monster Vivian convinced me you were. Peace, I remember how you used to sing in the shower. Off-key, but enthusiastic. I remember how you'd leave little notes in my lunch, just to make me smile. I remember the way you cried at sad movies, even the ones you'd seen a dozen times. I remember how you held me the night after the accident, when I was consumed with grief for Elena. You never once made it about yourself, never complained about your own injuries. You just held me and let me cry. That was the real you, kind, selfless, loving. And I destroyed you because I was too blind to see past my own pain. If there's an afterlife, if there's some way you can hear this, I need you to know that I loved you. Even when I was planning your death, part of me loved you. That's why it took me 5 years to go through with it. Every time I looked at you, every time you smiled at me, or touched my hand or told me you loved me, I wavered. I wish I'd been strong enough to break free of Vivian's influence. I wish I'd been smart enough to see through her lies. I wish I'd been man enough to choose love over revenge. But I wasn't, and now you're gone, and Elena's gone, and I'm here with nothing but regret and the memory of your voice saying you loved me, even as the poison burned through your veins. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that you were loved, even by the man who killed you. Especially by him. Forever sorry, Marcus. I watched him fold the letter carefully and place it in a shoebox with dozens of others. A year's worth of apologies and regrets, written to a woman who could never respond. But I was responding in my own way. I was here, watching him suffer, seeing him face the truth of what he'd done. The question was, what did I want to do with this moment? I could torment him. I could make his cell freezing cold. Could rattle his bars, could drive him slowly insane with supernatural harassment. Part of me wanted to. Part of me felt he deserved no peace, no rest, no relief from the guilt that was eating him alive. But another part of me, the part that had loved him once, just felt tired. Tired of anger, tired of hate, tired of the endless cycle of pain that had brought us all to this point. I thought about Elena, waiting for me in the cemetery. I thought about the strange pulling sensation I'd felt, the sense of something peaceful and new calling to me from beyond death. I thought about all the years I'd lost to this tragedy, all the life I'd never get to live. Marcus would spend the rest of his life in prison, haunted by guilt and regret. That was his punishment, and it was fitting. But what was mine? Was I going to spend eternity as a ghost, trapped by anger and the need for revenge? Was I going to let Vivian's poison continue to destroy lives even after death? I moved closer to Marcus, close enough that my ghostly presence dropped the temperature in his cell by several degrees. He looked up, shivering, and for just a moment, I thought I saw recognition in his eyes. "Renee," he whispered, "are you here?" I couldn't speak to him, couldn't touch him, couldn't give him the absolution he was seeking. But I could make a choice about my own future. I looked at the man who had murdered me, the man who had loved me, the man who had been as much a victim of Vivian's manipulation as I was. And I decided that I was done being angry. The cold in his cell lifted. The oppressive feeling of supernatural presence faded. And I turned away from Marcus Trudon for the last time. Elena was still waiting for me at her grave, patient as always. The pulling sensation was stronger now, more insistent. I could see it, a soft, warm light hovering just beyond the edge of perception, promising rest, renewal, a chance to start over. "Are you ready?" Elena asked. I looked back toward the prison, toward the town where I'd lived and died, toward all the pain and suffering that had defined the last years of my existence. "I think so," I said. But Elena, what if Marcus could have been different? What if Vivian hadn't poisoned his mind against me? Do you think we could have been happy? Elena considered this. Maybe, but we can't live in the world of what if. We can only deal with what actually happened. And what actually happened is that I married a man who spent 5 years planning to kill me. What actually happened, Elena said gently, is that you loved someone who was broken by grief and manipulated by evil. That doesn't make your love less real or less valuable. It just makes it tragic. The light was growing brighter, more welcoming. I could feel its warmth calling to me, promising an end to all the pain and confusion of the past year. Will I see you again? I asked Elena. In whatever comes next? I don't know, she admitted. But I hope so. I'd like to be friends again, without all the tragedy and death between us, said the captain. To the contrary, we walked together toward the light. 2 young women who had died too soon, who had been caught up in a web of lies and revenge that had destroyed more lives than it had saved. But we were done being victims now. We were ready to be something else, something new, something hopeful, something free. As we reached the edge of the light, I felt one last pull toward the world of the living. Marcus was still in his cell, still writing letters to a dead woman, still living with the consequences of his choices. Part of me wanted to stay, to watch over him, to see how his story ended. But his story was no longer mine to tell. He would have to find his own path to redemption, his own way to live with what he'd done. I'd spent enough time being defined by his actions, by his hatred, by his eventual regret. It was time to define myself by something else entirely. Goodbye, Marcus, I whispered into the wind. I hope you find peace someday, but I'm done waiting for it. And with that, Elena and I stepped into the light together, leaving behind the world of the living and all its pain and complexity. Whatever came next, reincarnation, heaven, simply peaceful oblivion. It had to be better than being trapped between life and death, between love and hate, between forgiveness and revenge. As the light enveloped us, I felt something I hadn't experienced since the night Marcus poisoned me. I felt free.